There's a man sitting in a bank lobby right now. Clean suit, leather briefcase, portfolio worth $3 million. He's meeting with his private banker. Third meeting this quarter. The banker smiles, slides a glossy folder across the marble table. Inside, mortgage products, credit lines, investment-grade loan packages. The banker says, "Leverage is how wealthy people stay wealthy." The man nods. He's heard this before. It sounds smart, but here's what the banker will never tell him. The rules that built his wealth are not the rules they're selling, because banks don't teach wealth. They teach dependency. They don't teach sovereignty. They teach strategic debt. And most smart men never realize they're being trained to stay trapped. This is the story of 7 rules banks will never teach you. Not because they're secret, because they're dangerous to the system. Because if you learned them, you'd never need them again. Let's go back to that lobby. Picture the scene. Polished floors, quiet voices, the hum of controlled wealth. Our man is successful, built his business from nothing. No debt, clean capital, strategic decisions, disciplined execution. But now he's being told that's not enough anymore. That real wealth requires leverage. That cash is lazy. That the wealthy use other people's money to multiply their own. And it sounds right. It sounds like the next level. But here's what's really happening. Let me show you. The bank makes money when you owe money. Every mortgage, every line of credit, every loan. It's not a product. It's a profit center. And you're not the customer. You're the asset. Because the moment you take that debt, you're locked in. Locked into payments, locked into terms, locked into dependency. And the wealthier you become, the more they want you leveraged. Because wealthy clients are low-risk, high-volume revenue streams. They pay on time, they borrow more, they never default. So the system is designed to keep you borrowing forever. Here's where it gets interesting. Let me tell you, rule number 1. Rule 1, cash is not lazy. Cash is sovereign. The bank tells you cash sitting idle is a wasted opportunity. They say you should put it to work through leverage. But here's the truth. Cash is optionality. Cash is freedom. Cash is the ability to move when everyone else is frozen. In 2008, while leveraged investors were liquidating at losses, the men with cash were buying assets at 30 cents on the dollar. In 2020, while businesses with debt were closing their doors, the men with reserves weathered the storm and expanded their empires. Cash doesn't make you rich in a bull market, but it keeps you sovereign in every market. And sovereignty is worth more than any leverage return. Let me give you a real example. Warren Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway holds over $100 billion in cash reserves. Every analyst criticizes him. Every banker says it's wasteful. But Buffett knows what they don't. Cash is power. When markets crash, he buys. When fear spreads, he moves. Not because he's lucky, because he's liquid, because he's free. That's rule 1. Cash is not lazy. Cash is sovereign. Now rule 2. Debt is not a tool. It's a master. The bank will tell you debt is neutral, just a tool. That wealthy people use it strategically to build faster. But here's what they won't say. Every dollar you owe is a chain. Every payment you make is sovereignty you're renting back. Because debt doesn't just cost you interest, it costs you freedom. You can't walk away from a bad deal. You can't pivot quickly. You can't take a year off. You can't say no. Because the payments don't stop. The obligations don't pause. And over time, you're not building wealth. You're servicing debt. Picture this. A man with a $5 million portfolio, but $3 million of it is leveraged through real estate loans. On paper, he's worth $5 million. In reality, he owns 2. And every month, he's paying $12,000 in debt service. That's $144,000 a year just to stay afloat. Not building, not growing, just maintaining the illusion of wealth. Meanwhile, the man with 2 million and zero debt, he sleeps better, he moves faster, he owns his life. That's rule 2. Debt is not a tool, it's a master. Rule 3. Your banker is not your advisor. Let's be clear about this. Your banker works for the bank, not for you, not for your wealth, for the institution. Their job is to sell products that generate revenue. Mortgages, lines of credit, investment loans, structured products. And they're trained to make it sound like personalized advice. But it's not advice, it's sales. And you're the target. Here's how you know. Ask your banker this question. What's the benefit to the bank if I take this product? Watch them pause. Watch them reframe. Watch them deflect. Because the answer is profit. Always profit. And the more you borrow, the more they make. That's not advice. That's a conflict of interest. Rule 3. Your banker is not your advisor. Rule 4. Interest rates are designed to keep you paying. Here's something most people never stop to calculate. A 30-year mortgage at 4% interest on $500,000. You don't pay $500,000. You pay over $850,000. That's $350,000 in pure interest. Money that builds no equity, creates no value, disappears forever. And the bank structures it so the early years are almost all interest. You're paying them first, building equity last. It's not an accident, it's by design. Because if you understood the true cost, you'd never take the deal. Let me show you what sovereignty looks like instead. A man buys a house for $500,000 cash. No mortgage, no interest, no 30 years of payments. He owns it day one. No bank, no master, pure equity. Yes, it requires discipline. Yes, it requires delay. But in 5 years, while his neighbor is still paying interest, he's building wealth with the cash flow he's not sending to the bank. That's Rule 4. Interest rates are designed to keep you paying. Rule 5. Inflation is a hidden tax on your obedience. This one is crucial. Listen closely to this. Banks love inflation because it makes debt cheaper over time. If you borrow at 3% and inflation runs at 5%, your debt loses value while their interest compounds. Sounds good for you, right? Here's the catch. Inflation also erodes your cash, your savings, your buying power. So they encourage you to borrow during inflation. They tell you it's smart, that you're paying back with cheaper dollars, but what they don't say is this: you're still making payments. And those payments are coming from income that's losing value too. Meanwhile, the bank holds the asset. You hold the obligation. If you default, they seize the property. You lose everything. Inflation doesn't make debt safe. It makes the system richer. And you're just caught in the middle. Rule 5. Inflation is a hidden tax on your obedience. Before we continue, let me say this. If you're realizing these rules were never taught to you, if you want frameworks that go deeper than surface-level finance, Luxona Patreon is where sovereign men build together. Real strategies, identity shifts, no hype, no debt worship. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, do it now. Because every week, we dismantle the myths that keep smart men dependent. Now, Rule 6. Wealth is not what you own. It's what you control. This is where most men get it wrong. They think wealth is the number on the portfolio statement. The house, the cars, the assets, the things. But if you owe money on it, you don't own it. The bank does. You're just the one making the payments. Real wealth is what you control without obligation. The cash in your account that no one can claim. The property you own outright that no one can repossess. The business you run that no creditor can touch. That's sovereignty. That's control. That's real wealth. Let me give you another real example. Dave Ramsey. Love him or hate him, he built a debt-free empire. No investors, no loans, no outside control. He owns everything, every asset, every decision, every dollar. And because of that, he's weathered every economic storm untouched. Not because he's the smartest, because he's the most sovereign. That's Rule 6. Wealth is not what you own, it's what you control. And finally, Rule 7. The wealthy stay wealthy by never needing banks. This is the rule that changes everything. The truly wealthy don't use banks to build wealth. They use banks to store wealth they've already built. Because once you're sovereign, once you're debt-free, once you're liquid, you don't need their products, you don't need their advice, you don't need their leverage, or their loans, or their credit lines. You're free. And freedom is the ultimate competitive advantage. Because while everyone else is making payments and managing obligations, you're moving, you're buying, you're building, you're expanding. Not because you're smarter, because you're unencumbered. And that's the secret the banks will never teach you, because if you learned it, they'd lose their best customer. Let's go back to our man in the lobby. The banker is still talking, still smiling, still selling. But now, imagine this. Our man stands up. He closes the folder, he thanks the banker politely, and he walks out. Not in anger, in clarity. Because he finally sees it, the game, the system, the trap, and he decides, not today, not ever. He's going to build wealth his way, on his terms. No debt, no dependency, no chains. Just cash, discipline, and the sovereignty that comes from ownership. And here's what happens next. Not immediately, but inevitably. He builds slower at first, but he builds stronger. He owns everything, controls everything, answers to no one. And while his peers are managing debt and making payments, he's accumulating real wealth, the kind that can't be repossessed, the kind that doesn't disappear when markets crash, the kind that passes to his children without obligation. That's the power of these 7 rules. They don't promise fast wealth, they promise sovereign wealth. They don't promise leverage, they promise freedom. And freedom is worth more than any debt-fueled return. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Are you building wealth? Or are you building dependency? Are you becoming sovereign? Or are you becoming a revenue stream? Are you listening to your banker? Or are you listening to yourself? Because the banks will never teach you these rules. Not because they're secret, because they're incompatible with profit. If you learned them, you'd never need them again. And that's exactly the point. These 7 rules are not about rejecting banks entirely. They're about understanding the game well enough to play by your own rules. To use banks when it serves you, not when it serves them. To build wealth that no one can touch, control, or claim. To become the kind of man who doesn't need permission to be free. So take these rules, test them, live them, and watch what happens when you stop playing by their rules and start building by yours. Welcome to Luxona, where men refuse to play small.